Begin the current Daf, Pesachim Daf Pei Aleph. Begin on the bottom of Pei Bay, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yomim. The Gemara continues the discussion in the previous Daf regarding the topic from our previous Mishnah of Tumas HaTayim. And as we had said in the previous Mishnah regarding the Korban Pesach, that if the meat or the dam was brought in a state of Tumah, then it's going to be, the tzitz is going to be Meratza. But if a person has Tumas HaGuf, as an individual, that's not acceptable with the tzitz. There is one exception that what's called Tumas HaTayim, when it's a tumah, as we'll describe in today's daf, that no one ever knew about. That's a type of tumah that's going to be merutza. That's where our Gemara continues and says that was only regarding mess, but not regarding that of ziva. And that's what the Gemara continues in discussing that idea. Hashem Kuzbaz V'Kazak and the Chesku, for anytime that Hashem was joining us in today's daf. So we're discussing today's daf are whether a carbon brought on behalf of somebody who was a zav, which is what we're starting the daf with, at the time of the carbon, can be aided by the tzitz to become acceptable. It's called ritu tzitz. Additionally, we can discuss whether a carbon tamid brought by a kohen who is tamid with tumas hatayim is acceptable. As we discussed in the previous stuff, we wanted to know if the kohen able to also have ritzitzitz regarding that of the Pesach and Nazir. We can discuss that regarding the carbon tamid. Then we discussed regarding a person who traveled on the road and later discovered that there was a dead body lying across the width of the road. What's the halachic status regarding truma and not regarding the carbon Pesach? And then we'll start the next Mishnah. And some of the key terms and concepts we're going to have in today's daf are shemer sim keneged yom, which is when a woman has a ziva discharge for the first day or two that she has this, she's shemeres yom, she watches the next day in regards to the day that she had seen to see if she's going to see again. Because if she sees 3 times, then she becomes a zava gedayla, and then she has to have shivnikim, then she got to bring a carbon. But for the first 2 days, if she's clean the next day, then she doesn't become a zava gedayla, she's a zava gedana. That's called shemeres yom keneged yom. The concept of ein dan lekavachem mahalacha. You cannot make a kavachayim, generally in the Torah you can make kavachayim, if this lenient thing has this halacha for sure, a stringent thing, but you cannot do that from halacha meshvasina. Although that's also biblical law, you cannot make a kavachayim based on that. And the halacha of etzim kisayir revias dam, which is when you have a bone the size of a barley corn, or a revias of leg of blood, in regards to that making a person tummy regarding what yeah, what not. So we begin the current daf, pay him a base on the bottom, 2 lines over the bottom of the Yomim. The Gemara literally is continuing this discussion from what we just said in the last line right before that. The Gemara had asked because the Gemara was attempting to bring a riot, we had asked a question regarding if the kohen is also going to have the halacha of tumas hatayim. So we had a little bit of a cheshbon, a calculated proof to try to show that it does apply to a kohen. Because we had said that the halacha of tumas hatayim is only lames bolvad. We said, okay, what is mes coming to exclude? Coming to exclude that of a sheretz. Oh, well, sheretz regarding whom? Regarding the owner doesn't have a problem regarding Tumas Sheretz. So it must be regarding the Kayin. Oh, so what are you telling me? Tumas does not work for the Kayin regarding Sheretz, but it would work for him regarding that of Tumas Mess. You see, it does work for him. Rabbi Yisa, which was the last line right before this, says no. You're talking about the owner regarding his Tumas HaTayim. If he became Tamei regarding some doubt Tamei that we didn't know about. Only retroactively do we know that it was Tamei. That's where you have the leniency regarding Pesach. And with saying that regarding Tumas HaTayim the Ziva, which as we explained, if on the 7th day of a Ziva, he goes and he has what's called quote-unquote Tumas HaTayim, that we didn't know about at the time that happened. Only retroactively do we find that it was really Tamei. That's what we're going to say that there's not going to be a heter of Tumas HaTayim. So Tamei only work regarding mess. As we'll explain today's daf, what exactly is Tumas HaTayim, but you didn't know about it at all. That's where we're going to say Tumas HaTayim, but not regarding that of Ziva. That's what the Gemara continues now and asks, but Tumas HaTayim, is that really so that, and this is what we have over here that we explained, that the tzitz will not be Meratza Tumas HaTayim Ziva. For example, if the Zav brings the carbon after the mikvah on the 7th day, assuming he'll be tar at night. However, later that day he has another Ziva, which makes him tummy retroactively, he had no way of knowing that this would happen. So that's what's called quote-unquote Tumas HaTayim. Regarding that, they were saying that tzitz will not be Meratza. So that's what Tumas Mes is coming to exclude from. That's our Kedin says that Tumas Tam is that really so that Tumas HaTayim, this halacha Moshe Sinai, the Ziva le Meratza, that regarding Ziva, that there is no ritzu of the tzitz, it's only regarding mess, and that's how you explain the Brisa. But Vatani, in the Brisa, Rabbi Yisa, he says, shemeres yom keneged yom, which we explained in the introduction, that if a woman, let's say, had a Ziva discharge one day on the 13th of Nisan, so halacha is on the 14th of Nisan, so there Pesach, she has to watch that day. What are you watching for? Because if you have no discharge, you're tar like nothing happened, because that was what's called Zabagitana. You have to watch today to see if you can have another Ziva discharge on the 14th of Nisan. Because she might end up seeing 3 days in a row, and then she becomes Zabagitana, she has to shiv nikim, she has to bring a carbon, so you gotta watch. where they went, they shechted the korban Pesach, it's their Pesach, not the these, and then they sprayed the blood, they didn't have a payal from it out, b'shem yishla on her second day. So she's still in doubt. Maybe she's going to see today, and it's going to combine with yesterday, and then she might see also tomorrow, which makes it 3 days in a row, make her Zava Gemura. Now, if she's not going to see, she's pure for that evening, and then she'll be able to have the korban Pesach. Now, so they brought the korban Pesach, because relying on the fact that she's not going to have a discharge, and she'll be charged that night. But, afterwards, guess what happened? She had a Ziva discharge. So she brought her korban Pesach at, let's say, 10 hours into the day, and then boom, an hour later, she has a Ziva discharge. Says the Braiser in her health. So she obviously cannot even become a Pesach because she is Tameh, because she has to wait for tomorrow, what's called a Ziva Ketana. She's Tameh for one more day. She has to be Shemer Siyum Keneged Yom the next day on the first day of Pesach. So she can't make the korban Pesach that night because she's Tameh, but she's exempt from making another korban Pesach. In other words, you fulfill your obligation. You don't have to bring a Pesach Shem. Says the Gemara, my timer, what's the reason why Lav Mishum isn't because the Gemara assumes because at the time of the Shechita and the Zrika, she was in a state of doubt. We didn't know. This is what's called, so to speak, the Thomas time of Ziva. We don't know that she's going to have the discharge. And that's why the Miratz tzitz, that the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wears is going to appease for the Thomas time of Ziva, even though retroactively it's revealed that she was tummy at the time with a definite Thomas of Tahayim. Because she did have a discharge. Obviously, that you see Ziva is included in the heter of Tumas HaTahayim, which rejects the interpretation we said in the Bryce of the previous Daf, so that we should reject the proof of showing that a Kohen also has Tumas HaTahayim. So Ahmed said, no. Interesting type of answer the Gemara says. Mishum Diksavar, it's because the Diksavar Rabbi Yisi holds that a Shemer Sim Keneged Yoim, once she already counts part of the day, what's called Miktzis HaYoim, and she goes into the mikvah, let's say, in the morning time, she's actually tar from the tumah of yesterday. When she subsequently sees that day, mikana labari batama. She's actually tameh from here on. So when she sees the second day, let's say, when on the third day she has to be shemer siyam keneged yom, it's for this day. So therefore, at the time of the zrika and the shchita, she was a bona fide tahira. Now the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Yisi, and they say that no. When you see on day 2, retroactively it's revealed that you were a ziva, and it's one tumah, and at the time of the shechita it was a suffix, so you're right, you're going to have to bring by a Pesach Sheni according to Rabbanan. But according to Rabbi Yisi, he says no, you were tahar already, and then you become tamei for another Shemer Siyum. Now the Gemara later on is going to ask, it says according to Rabbi Yisi, if you tell me every single day is an independent tumah, because you already had Miktzis Yom Kikul in the morning, and you're tahar already, let's say at 10 o'clock in the morning, so how are you ever going to combine for Ziva to make a Zava Gedolah? We were saying all along you become a Zava Gedolah and see day 1, day 2, day 3. According to Rabbi Yisi, you never have day 1, day 2. The moment in the morning that you didn't have the second discharge yet, you're already tar. You already did your Shemer Siyam. And then when you see a few hours later, it's a new Zava Gedolah. So I didn't remember Zava Gedolah. How's you combining? You're already done. You already started a new Zava Gedolah, a new Zava Gedolah. You can have 10 days in a row, you still have to become a Zava Gedolah. So the Gemara is going to address that question. But first the Gemara asks, and says, but Tanya. But we learned in the Brisa that Rabbi Yisi, he says, and this is the same Rabbi Yisi, he says, Zav bal shtei re'iyos, which, as Rashi points out, the reason why we're saying that if it's a Zav that had 2 discharges, because if there was 3 discharges, he would not be able to be able to eat the korban Pesach in the evening until he brings his karbanas on day 8. Because Rashi says it can't be that we're talking on day 8, because the words of that afterwards he does have a discharge, that he's retroactively going to make his mishkav a moshav tamei. But once the first discharge comes out at a time when he's already fit to bring a korban, which is on day 8, so then this would be a different ziva, because once you're on day 8, it's already done with your original ziva, and the mishkav moshav from yesterday after the tefillah b'tilna actually would be tarla mafreya, even if you table just in the morning of the 7th day. So, be that as it may, we're obviously talking about on day 7. So therefore, it must be talking about, not day 7, we must be talking about a Zav that had 2 discharges, because if you had 3, then we'd be talking about day 7, and that wouldn't be appropriate because you wouldn't be able to eat the karbanas. Even though you'd be tahar, you're still mechusik, you still have to bring your karbanas on day 8. But even you had 2 discharges. And you're on day 7, the difference over here is there's a difference between a Zav and a Zava. A Zava, the female, could see 2 days and she's still a Zava Katana, and then she becomes Zava Gedolah, which is on when she has 3 discharges, and then she's tummy for Shiva Nikim, and she has to bring a carbon. By the male, is different. The Zav, 2 discharges, he's tummy for Shiva Nikim, he has to keep 7 days, but he only has to bring a carbon if he had 3 discharges. So that's what Rashi was explaining, that you're not going to have, you can't say he had 3 discharges, because then he wouldn't be tar on the night of after the 7th, because you still have to bring your carbonas on the next day, on day 8. So we're talking about that he had 2 discharges, so he has Shiva Nikim. So on day 7 is on Erev Pesach. So that when they shechted him, they sprayed the blood on his 7th day. And then he subsequently, after they brought the Korban Pesach, he had another discharge, which cancels his whole Shiva Nikim. The equivalent would be, as says the Brisa, says Rabbi Yisi, is a Shemer Sim Kedegim, which is really the same thing, meaning Sheshafta B'Zork LeB'Shein Shlo. On the 2nd day, which is that 1 day she has to keep, which is the equivalent of a zav on the 7th day, that they went and they brought the carbon for her, and then she had a discharge. So in these cases, the zav and the zava, they're going to be mitami, their bedding and their sits, what they sat on, even after they had the tefillah, they're going to be mitami l'mafrei retroactively, because everything that they counted, whether it be 1 day, because your Shemer Yisrael, whether it be 7 days, because you had Shiva Nikim and Zav that had 2 discharges, you deconstructed the whole counting, and it's like you got to start all over again, a reset button. Because the pasuk says, "Meyukat says Vav, b'safalei Shivas Yamim." You have to count 7 days, and you don't have 7 days because on the 7th day you had a discharge. Now, from the fact that it says also by the Shemer Yisrael that limafreya, obviously that the Tumah even works retroactively. And even so that contradicts what we said before, because we said that according to Rabbi Yisi, it's not mitami l'mafreya. We said the reason why he holds that you're not going to have to bring a carbon Pesach Sheni is because it's only mikana l'aba. Here you see, no, it is l'mafreya, and therefore whatever she had sat on is going to be tummy, even though it was after she killed herself in the morning of that day, and she only had tumah a few hours later. Whatever was in between is tummy. And the B'tur B'las Pesach Sheni, yet still he holds that they can be exempt from bringing a carbon Pesach on a month later, Pesach Sheni. Obviously, you have to say that the reason is because he holds a Tumas HaTahim, and that because we didn't know about it, therefore it's mutter regarding the Korban Pesach, like we said regarding Tumas HaTahim of Mess. That we said that's a unique halacha Mishba on Pesach and regarding that of Nazir. Now, why do we pick specifically Mishkabas? And Mishkabas says Rashi that the bedding and what she said on, that's a chiddush because of it's an avatoma to make a person tamei, which that's what zav is different than all of the tamim, that it makes Thomas a mishka b'meishav. But one thing is where we see that ritzitzitz works even by Thomas atahim, even by that of a zav, and not like the way we had established on the previous daf that Rabbi Yisi does not hold that it's going to make Thomas atahim ziva, and just as gimi mekan labo. Here we see that it is going to have the heter of Thomas atahim. Somebody said no, not true. Ma'alam Afreya, what does he mean when he says that the tumah is going to be retroactive? It's midrabanan. It's only rabbinically, because rabbinically you could get confused with different things. But midiraisa, no, there's no tumah retroactively. Rather, it's from here on. Not the zav on the 7th day, and not a shemeres yom on our 2nd day, because mixtas hayem is kikula. The partial day is like you counted that day already, and therefore regarding the Korban Pesach, we consider you as totally tar, like we explained, and that's why you're pater from a Pesach sheni. Rabbi Shloimy holds this whole tumah retroactive is only rabbinically. The time of Glenda Brisa. Rabbi Shloimy, he says, Aval but Rashi says he doesn't know what this but is going on. But Zav Shara B'Shvi Shaloi. If a Zav had a discharge on the 7th day, so he says Shalafana, so it destroys everything that he had counted up until this point. He has to recount another 7 days. Because you didn't have 7 clean days, you had a discharge on day 7. No, it should only demolish that day itself, and he has to count 1 more day. Then he asked on Rabbi Yechanan, it says but either way, it's that Rabbi Yechanan saying is difficult. Rabbi Yechanan holds that the tumah is retroactive, and that is, you don't say that miktas hayom, the partial of the 7th day, is going to make it like as if you had 7 days and you didn't finish your count yet. Then all the 7 days should be discounted. Because it says in the pasuk, which have one tower for all the 7 days. You can't have a tumah in between somewhere in the middle of the 7 days. That says needed of lama gimel days. And if you count skipping, like over here, where you're gonna the 7th day you're not gonna count, and you're gonna make up another one day 8, comes out that there's an interruption. You have 6, and then 1 not, and then 1 yeah. So then all days shouldn't work. And if he holds that the tumah is only from here and on, meaning, what does that mean? That on day 7, when you had midway through the day 7, it started a new tumah, but that partial of the day already counted, and you finish your Shem Nikim, so you have another dister. Then that shouldn't even ruin day 7 itself. Rather, it should be like the first discharge of a new ziva, which you only have tumah for the evening, and you should be able to table in the evening mitar, because the first discharge of a zav, the Gemara needed of Ein Beis Amarav tells us it's just like the halach of Keri, which is like a seminal discharge, which you just tell me up until the evening. So then what's this understanding of Rabbi Yechon? You got to make up a day. Manashach, either way, either you should not have all 7, or you should have just tell me till the evening. Elaima rather says the Gemara, you're right. Say, what Rabbi Yechon was saying was, Lo yister v'lo yom, not lo yister el yom. Lo yister v'lo yom. In other words, even that day itself should not be saser, because already part of the day had passed, which you say miktzim kakulay, and you already finished the 7 days, and you already left that halacha of being zava. Oh, which for Amalei, and Rabbi Yishai said Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yisi koi kavasach. Rabbi Yisi, and this is why we're bringing this in, because we're saying of that Rabbi Yishai also says Rabbi Yisi, like we just said. Rabbi Yisi says like you, Rabbi Yechanan, that he also holds that the tumah is mikan l'abba, and where do we know this? From the fact that we had quoted him before that you're exempt from being a Pesach Sheni. But then the question is, as Rashi explains, this is just concluding what we're trying to say. It's not really asking a question. But Rabbi Yisi, but we answer Rabbi Yisi says, how could you say that's Mikan Laba, but Rabbi Yisi himself is quoted as saying that the Tumah is L'mafreya? I love Shema. No, rather it's obvious, and this Rabbi Yisi is also saying like we answered before, Mitam L'mafreya midrabana. That we say this Tumah retroactively is only rabbinically. But obviously, Rabbi Yisi holds that this L'mafreya Rabbi Yisi is only rabbinically, but in B'deiraisa it is Mikan Laba, and therefore, if a Shemer sees on day 2, or Zav sees on day 7, if he was only a Zav of Balshtei Riyus, which he's already in Mitzvah Yom of the 7 days, it's Kekuloi, and therefore the Korban Pesach is going to be valid. Again, not because Tumas HaTayim of Ziva works, because that would only say if you have a Tumah retroactive, which would really be Matame. Okay, since you didn't know about it, we would say that's what Tumas Time is telling you that's going to work after the fact. So it would sound like that Rabbi Yisi is saying. It's not true. He's not saying that. There is no Tumas time over here. So why you examine Korban Pesach? Because the Tumas Mikan Laba. Because Rabbi counted up until this day, in the 7th day, the Mitzvah Yom is Kikul. It's like you counted the whole thing. That's why it's going to be exempt from being a Pesach Shein. Now the Gemara continues and says, but Rabbi Yisi, okay, based on everything we just said, Hashda Amanah that he's saying that Mikan Laba Mitame, that you're telling me that any time a woman has tumah or a man has tumah, that it's only from here and on. The problem is, and therefore we said that you don't really have tumas tumah ziva, that it would be seisel of afreya, that you need ritzutzitz, and that's why we rejected the question that we had, because he holds that there's no lemafreya to say tumas time. It's only whenever you have it, it's starting from this point onwards. You're not going to say retroactive. So the problem is then lemeis bovad. We had previously said that, okay, so where do we have the ritzitzitz of Tumas HaTahim? We said this in the previous Daf, that's only for the Tumah of mess. So, L'mu'utei mai, what's that coming to exclude? Which was the Gemara's discussion in the previous Daf. Obviously, it's coming to exclude the halach of sheretz, and regarding that of a kohen, which was the original question that we started from the previous Daf, to say that this exemption, this heter of ritzitzitz, of Tumas HaTahim, is that only for the owner, or is that even for the kohen? Obviously, it's coming to exclude the kohen regarding sheretz, because as we said, if it's regarding the owners, so then it doesn't make a difference regarding sheretz, and as we said, because regarding the owner, the sheretz, even definite, is not going to be a problem. Now, you tell me that the Tumas of mess, however, is going to be mutter for the kohen, so nif should be no, that we should resolve from this, the kohen, v'hutraloi, Tumas HaTahim. Why? Because if you recall from the previous daf, we had originally rejected, and we had said, no, it's not coming to exclude that of sheretz. It's coming, and therefore of kohen, it's coming to exclude the bailam of Pesach regarding ziva. That the Tumas of ziva is not going to be mutter. But we just said according to Rabbi Yisi that there is no Tumas HaTahim of ziva. You can't exclude Tumas of ziva. There is no. Why not? Because there's no retroactivity regarding ziva to say that there's going to be tumah, to say that when it's time, when it's a suffix, that then it's not going to be accepted with the tzitz. There's only Mikan Laba. So you can't exclude that. What are you excluding when you say mess? You must be excluding sheretz. Well, who We went through the whole cheshbon of the previous stuff. They can't be the Bailam. Must be the Kohen. Aha! That's the answer. So that must be this Tumas Toim by the Kohen, by Mess. To which Amri, they said no. La'olam b'Bailam b'Pesach. Truthfully, we're talking about that it's regarding the owner, his Tumas Toim of his Tumas Aguf, regarding the common Pesach. Uksava, but Rabbi Yisi holds, ain't Sheikh the Mezarkin, not to make Sheikh. And you recall this was part of the Cheshbon. We were only asking according to the one who holds Sheikh the Mezarkin. We have to say that Rabbi Yisi would hold, if we don't want to bring a raya, that no, you cannot slaughter and spray the dam of the Karm Pesach on someone who's a Tamei Sheretz. So the Itzach Lemute. So therefore you need to go ahead and exclude it. And you have to tell me that not only if someone is a definitive Tamei Sheretz, that you cannot bring the Karm Pesach, but even if he has Tumas Tamei Sheretz, is also going to reject him from bringing the carbon Pesach. So therefore, it's not a raya regarding the Kohen, it's regarding the owner, regarding his Tumas Tamei of Sheretz. But now the Gemara has a more general question regarding Rabbi Yisi. And Rabbi Yisi, according to Rabbi Yisi, as we had alluded to this question earlier, Zava Gemura Hecha Mishkachas La. How do you have what's called a Zava Gemura? A Zava Gemura is a Zava who had a discharge 3 days in a row. Then, besides keeping the next day tar, she has to be tar for 7 days, she got to bring a carbon. How do you ever have that? Since he holds Miktzah Yoyim is counted as if you counted that day, and when you have a discharge, it's Mikama, but it's only starting from here on that you're tummy. So every single day is an independent tumah. It's not going to connect with the train from yesterday because you already counted at 9 o'clock in the morning and you're already done. At 10 o'clock when you have the discharge, it's a new thing. So how do you become a Zabagadayla? Says you have 2 answers. Either b'shefas, either the woman was flowing all 3 days. She didn't stop. So you don't have to count at all. Meaning there's no counting. There's no tahara counting. There's no shemeres yoyim because she was constantly flowing blood and therefore she didn't have any miktzas yom kikulei. Or you might say, if you want, you could say, it's going to rasa called shnei ben hashmashes. Where, no, she wasn't flowing 3 days blood. But however, we're talking about that at the beginning of every day started off betuma where there was no counting at all. Because the counting is only, the miktzas yom would only be if you have part of the beginning of the day. If you start off the day tummy, you can't count, you can't say miktzas yom that you counted shemeres yom because you start off the day tummy. So if 2 bein hashmashes are sufficient to say that she had 3 consecutive days of tummy, like Rashi gives an example. For example, let's say bein hashmashes on Erev Shabbos. So bein hashmashes, you have the end of Erev Shabbos and the beginning of Shabbos. And then bein hashmashes tomorrow, Matzah Shabbos, which is the end of Shabbos and the beginning of Sunday, you have 3 consecutive days, Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. And in addition, you didn't have any beginning of the day's tar that would be counted, because as Rashi says, according to what he's explaining, according to the one who holds Miktzim Kekulai, it's the beginning of the night that would be counted. And you don't need Alei Sashachim. The fact that the Gemara is saying, Bein Hashmashes, it's not talking about where she saw it all night, you see that the Miktzim would even be in the beginning of the night, the way Rashi says. But be that as it may, you're never going to have a Miktzim Kekulai, because the moment the day started, which is at nighttime, she was tamei, so you can't say miktzah kekulai.
Isn't shafas like a 1 count? You could count it as 3.
Yeah.
Even though it was no hefsek, it's
right. So the Gemara also discusses regarding starting. Could a woman really flow all the time? But the way the simple understanding is, she never had a tahar moment. Second approach is saying that no, she wasn't flowing the whole time, but she saw by the 2 bein hashmashes, so therefore that's never had that one moment that when the day started to be Shemeres Yom, and you were tummy for 3 days in a row. Now, continuing on this halacha of Tumas HaTohem, which continuing on the theme of which we never answered regarding the question of if the Kohen also has ritzut tzitz of Tumas HaTohem, so by Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef has another question. Kohen ha'meratza b'tamid. A Kohen who's appeasing with a carbon tamid the whole year, not Pesach anymore, but around the carbon tamid. Hotrulay Tumas HaTohem. Is it permitted for him to tumah time, or not? As Rashi explains, the question is, according to the one who says that tumah is the chuya b'tzibur, that by carbon tzibur, it's not just hutra, it's the chuya, which means we try as much as possible not to do it in the state of tumah. So Rabbi Yisrael is asking, do we have to try to find a kohen that's tahar because of the tumas hatohaim of this kohen or not? In addition, we're also saying it's according to the one who is going to be mentioned later on, that the Tumas HaTohem that the tzitz is meratzah by Nazir and Pesach was even like a tchila. For example, let's say you knew about it before the blood was thrown, meaning when the shechita was done, you didn't know. But before the blood was thrown, you realized that there was a Tumas HaTohem over here on the owner, and still we'll let you go ahead and spray it. So now we're asking this Tumas HaTahoim, that by the Bailam, we say even like a Tchila, you go ahead and spray the blood of the carbon. Regarding the Kayin of a carbon Tamid, would we also say like a Tchila, there's a Heter Gomer, even though we normally say Dechuya B'tzibur, but here we would say, you could go ahead and you could do that, but we don't have to try to go get a Kayin that's taught. As the Gemara explains the question. So maybe we're going to say, as we had mentioned in the previous stuff, which we had asked regarding, the Kayin of Meratzim carbon is saying, Shal Nazar Beis HaPesach, that a Kayin that's bringing the carbon of the Nazar Beis HaPesach. Who Chulei Tumas HaTahoim, for him it's permitted Tumas HaTahoim, just like we said regarding the owners. Now, however, Kayin of Meratzim Tamid, what would the halacha be regarding the Kayin who brings the carbon Tamid all year round? What's the question? Me, Amrina, do we say, Ki Gemir Tumas HaTahoim, when do we have the halacha which we're saying that Tumas HaTahoim is B'Pesach? Like on Pesach. But Tamid, like Gemir, but we don't have it regarding the carbon Tamid. Maybe Yolo Tamid and Pesach, we would somehow learn out the carbon Tamid from the carbon Pesach. Some Rabbi says Kabul Chemer says, yeah, you do learn out from Pesach as a Kabul Chemer. You do if regarding places that we didn't allow a definitive Tamid at all. For example, Nazir, someone's going to bring a carbon Pesach as an individual, which is a carbon of a Yachid. So there's no heter of Tumah for those individuals. Yet we have Allah Sinai. That when you have Tumas HaTahoim, which was that you didn't know about it at the time that's going to be permitted. So Malkum Shudley Tumah do is regarding carbonas that we permit even a definitive Tumah when there's no Tahirin. Let's say when a Tumah happens by the Tzibur, by a carbon Tamid, so as a continuum base, meaning even if you say Tumah Dechuya, but if you have no other Kahanim, we do permit it. Ain't a ditch isn't a Kabbalah that it should be totally mutter, even when there are Tahirin, to go ahead and have the Kayin to do in the Tumas HaTahoim, which again that would be the same thing by the carbon Tamid, which is the carbon Tzibur, because that's from a Kabbalah where we let Tumas Yedua, so by the owner, which we let Tumas HaTahoim, for sure we should let Tumas HaTahoim by the Kayin who's doing the avoid by the carbon Tamid. Amadi said, could you make such a Kabbalah mehalacha from a halacha l'mesh Sinai, like this grave that had Tumas HaTahoim that we didn't know about it when you passed over, which is halacha l'mesh Sinai by Nazir and Pesach, because the halacha of Tumas HaTahoim is not like because of a halacha sveikus that we say that generally there would be a tumah by a tamid to say that what was the heter by Pesach. That it was just a Gila Muslim Afreya Ba'alma, that was just a retroactive verification to be lenient by the laws of Suffolk, to say that, now by the carbon Tamid, or even by Vadai that's Tamid, you're lenient. For sure you should be lenient by Suffolk. No, that's not the source of the halacha of Tumas HaTahoim. Rather, at the time that the person became Tamid, if it was Tumas HaTahoim, which, as we're going to explain later on the Daf, that means no one ever knew at that time that there was such a grave over there, such a tumah, that this that we're going to be matar by Nazir and Pesach is because of Lachmash Sinai. Not because of it was doubt. So if you make them by definitive Tumah, by you're telling me a Kabbalah, so I'm sure by this suffix of Tumah that we should be making. It's not true. It's not based on logic. It's not suffix and Vadai. It's a Lachmash Sinai. But and since that halacha that we're leaning by Tumah and Pesach and Nazir is a Lachmash Sinai, you cannot make a Kabbalah, even if it would make sense based on logic. You can't make a Kabbalah from Allah Mashmi Sinai to say that for sure the leniency would apply by Tamid if you only say it by Pesach and Nazir. As the Gemara brings with Tana Glina Brisa, the context of this Brisa is the Machlekes Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Kiva in Masechtas Nazir, where the Gemara there is discussing regarding a revius of dam of a dead person, that a Nazir who's not supposed to come Tamid, that he's not going to have to cut off his hair for touching or carrying that revius of dam. Which Rabbi Kiva says, what he told Rabbi Lazar, Kabbalah. If a bone the size of a barley corn of a dead person, which does not contaminate a person if he's just in the same oil, in the same room as that bone, still a Nazir would have to cut his hair and start all over if he touches it or carries it. So a vias dam, which contaminates a person just by being in the same room, isn't a Kabbalah that a Nazir should have to cut off his hair and start over if he touches it or carries it? Which our Gemara quotes this part, Akiva. Atzim Kisaira, the bone the size of a barley corn that it does has to cut off his hair and start over if he touches carries it. That's halacha. That's halacha Mashmei Sinai. That's not written in the Torah. And therefore Revi'ah's dam, that you want to learn out from it, because Revi'ah's dam is mochamer, you see it has Thomas oil, that you want to make through a Kabbalah to say for sure the Nazir will have to go ahead and start all over. That is the Kabul Chaymer. Being done the Kabul Chaymer halacha, you cannot make a Kabul Chaymer from halacha mashmasin unless it's something explicitly in the Torah. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar says you can't make a Kabul Chaymer. So the Gemara says the same thing is difficult on Rab over here. How can you say a Kabul Chaymer to the covered Talmud from halacha mashmasin from Nazar and Pesach? You cannot make a Kabul Chaymer from halacha mashmasin. So Elmer, you're right. Rather, Yalav, you could learn out Talmud from Pesach regarding the head of Thomas Satayim, not from a Kabul Chaymer, but rather you could learn it out from a Gzeir Shalom. You can learn it out, Moyadoy Pesach. It says the word Moyadoy by Kam Pesach. It says the word Moyadoy by Kam Tamid. Just like by Pesach you have the heter of Tumas HaTohaim, so you'll have the heter of Tumas HaTohaim regarding the Kohen that's doing the Aveda by the Kam Tamid. Okay, that concludes that part. Now the Gemara says, the Tumas HaTohaim Gufa, this essence of this halacha, that there is such a heter by Nazar and Leisa Pesach of Tumas HaTohaim, Hechik Siva. Where is this written? Now Rashi explains the historical definition of the Gemara's question, that this was asked in the Beis Medrash before the question that we just brought of Rav Yosef. In other words, in the years of Rav Yosef, they already knew the conclusion of this Gemara's discussion, that Tumas HaTohaim is a Gemara Gemirla, which Allah Meshmei Sinai. And that's why the Gemara had asked, can you make a Kabul Chaymer from Malacha? But our Gemara doesn't know this yet. This was a prior discussion. And the Gemara says, no, Vu state, where is it written in the Torah that there is such a concept of Tumas HaTohaim? So the Gemara has three different interpretations. Rabbi Elazar, he says, Amakra, it's possible in Midbar. It says, Yamus Nesalav, that if a person is going to become Tami as a Nazir, so then he's going to have to start all over. What's the word olav? On him. Let's take on him. The Mechuveres olav, I mean, say that it's clear on him, meaning it has to be bar, it has to be clear that he became Tami from a mess, then he's going to have to start over. But if it was Thomas time, which we never knew about, then it's not going to be problematic. Then you're going to remain Tahar, and it's going to be a fulfillment of your Nazirs. But says okay, Ashkan Nazir, that pasuk only tells you regarding Nazir. Isa Pesach, no, where do you have a source regarding that if someone's bringing a Korban Pesach, that Tumas Tim is not a problem? From Rabbi Yechon, he says, Amakra is another pasuk in Bamidbar, where it says, Tamil Nefesh, if someone became Tamil to a dead person, or B'derech Rechayk Lachem, or if he was a far distance for you. Now, what's Lachem? What's mean Derech Lachem? And additionally, as Rashi says, Lachem is going back also on the first case of Tamil Nefesh, which tells you, for you means to say that it's clear to you that this is a far distance, and also that you were Tamei. When's the Tamei that's going to make a problem for the Korban Pesach? Only when it was clear, but if it was Tumas HaTohaim, then it's not going to be a problem. Shimon Lakusham, he brings a third source. He says, Kederach, meaning, the pasuk is equating the Tamei L'Nefesh, someone became Tamei for a dead person, similar to the Derech HaChayka. So, Tumah is like a derech. What does that mean? Ma derech b'gali, just like a road, a highway is out there in the open. If Tumah and b'gali, so too the Tumah has to be also only if it's out there in the open. But if it's Tumah Sahayim, Tumah the depth, that no one ever knew about it, then you're not going to be Tumah. Problem is, Mesa the Gemara rejects all these three interpretations of the following brisa. The brisa says, what is the qualification of a Tumas HaTohaim, which we're saying all along in the sugya from the previous daf, that there's a heter for Nazir and someone that's bringing his Korban Pesach. Says the brisa, if no one until the end of the world ever recognized that there was a tumah over here, that's going to be Tumas HaTohaim. Meaning, if you subsequently find out that there was tumah, okay, then it's not going to be a problem. But if anyone, even at the end of the world, knew about this, means that Tumas HaTohaim, that does not qualify for the heter of Tumas HaTohaim. So the Gemara asks, so Rabbi Elazar would be mechuberes Allah, according to Rabbi Elazar learns out from the pasuk, and that has to be clear to him. Sa'adi until he knows. Why, if someone else in the world knows, is that going to take away my Tumas HaTohaim? I don't know. It's not Allah, so it should still have the heter of Tumas HaTohaim. Rabbi Yechon, that he says that for you in the plural, so it should be clear for you, meaning Adi Yoda Batchein, until two people know about it. Why is it enough if one person in the world knows? It says Lachem in the plural. And if Shimon Lakusham that he says to be like a road, would sound like Adi Yadi Kulam until the whole world knows. Everyone knows such a highway, like a Google Earth. Right? It's you know there's such a highway, so why would it be enough if one person knows? Everyone should have to know. So the Gemara says, you're right. It's not really like any one of these three interpretations. Tumas HaTohaim, this head of Tumas HaTohaim, is a Gemirla. It's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. The Krah and the pasuk that each one of these three brought is a smach, just an allusion to this, but really it's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. That's why I said before that you cannot know the halacha of the Korban Tamid from a Kabul Chaymer, from that of the Pesach and the Nazir, because that would be a Kabul Chaymer from halacha l'Moshe Messinai. You cannot learn Kabul Chaymer from halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Now, the Gemara continues to qualify that Amar Bar Vashi says, Loishon, we didn't learn that the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wears is meratze, is a piece is under Tumas Atayim. By Nazir and Isa Pesach, Elisha Naidul Achas Rika. Only if, and this is the Gemara's Havamina, only if he found out after the blood of the carbon was already sprayed. Okay, when the blood was sprayed, Shabir is dark. It was sprayed appropriately because no one ever knew that there was ever such a tumah to think that it was tumah. Okay, then it's going to be okay. But if he knew already that he had a tumas adoim before the blood was sprayed, then lemeratza. It's not going to piece. It's not okay. You can't spray. It's not going to work. That's it. It's only after it was done, but not before it's done. The Gemara says basically, the Gemara rejects this from the following brisa. The brisa says, which we're going to go back to explain once we finish and answer the question. If someone finds a dead person, that the dead person is laying on the width of the road, and this person passed by that road. Now it's impossible that he didn't either touch the dead person or move it or lean over it, which is some of oil, because he's laying along the width, which is the narrow part, and the length of the body is going along the width. So he for sure went and passed and became tummy from the dead person. So lit truma, meaning if he's on his way to eat truma, or he wants to eat truma, then tummy will consider him as tumma, because there's no heter of tumas time regarding truma. Now, as Rashi points out, if the dead person was along the length of the road, then even tumas time he wouldn't have over here, then he would be okay. But talking about that, it was along the width, so therefore it's not okay to eat truma. But l'nazav oiser pesach, which we say you have the heter of tumas time, if he's on his way to bring his carbon nazirs, or he's going to bring carbon pesach, then Torah is going to be tar. Now this is what the Gemara's question is. Whenever you say the word tame or tar, labahu sounds like for the future, not just what was done. And so it sounds like that you're much even before the blood of the carbon pesach was sprayed, because we're saying that you're tar. Not that it was kosher, you're tar, which sounds like okay, now you could continue doing carbon pesach. But that rejects what we said that no, it's not okay. It's only after the fact. And the Rebbe says, "You're right. If we had said this teaching of Mabra Avashi Hachin, and this is what was said. Mabra Avashi says, don't say that that only works. No, don't say that. Don't say only works even only if you find it after the blood was sprayed. Then it works. If you find it before, then it's not going to work. No, even if you find that before the blood was sprayed, Miratze is going to work, and that as long as it wasn't known at the time of Shechita, but even if you know it before the Shechita, then it's going to work. Now, Gufa, we go back to explain this brisa that we introduced because of the question that we used from it. The brisa said, if someone finds a dead person that was laying along the width of the road, and this guy passed by that, so obviously touched this dead person, or leaned over, or some type of a tummy. So literally, we said tummy is a tummy. L'nazar is a pesach, but as a nazar, or he's going to do this from pesach, tar is going to remain tar. Now, but we have a few qualifications in this halacha. And that says the brisa, when we say this, is she'en limakam laver. Only if, as we said, he has no room to pass where we know that the dead person took up the whole width of the road. Now, although that regarding a definite tumah, since at that time that he passed by, it was a tumas atahim, meaning nobody knew about this dead person, and also over here, this guy didn't know until he shechted his karbanos. That's what we say that is that you could spray the blood for the nazar and the isa pesach. But regarding truma, that's where we say that you're going to be tummy. So although it's definite that you became tummy, it doesn't make a difference. That was what the qualification was for tumas atayim. Now, it says the Raisa, that's only if you know for sure that you had no room to pass by. But if there is room for you to pass by, after truma tar, then for truma you're going to be tar, because that means to say even when you find out, but there was a suffix of the tumah b'shus harabim. And suffix to b'shus harabim is tar, because even though he's taking up the whole road, it was at an angle that you could pass by without touching the tummy person. So though maybe you did, but maybe you didn't, and therefore even for truma you'd be tar because of suffix tumah b'shus harabim. Another qualification is, but when do we say, but if he takes up the whole road, then with truma you are going to be tamei? It's only shemat zeshal. You find that the dead person was intact, it was complete. So one whole body was taking up the whole road, you for sure became tummy. But if it was broken and disconnected in different parts, then tar is going to be tar even for truma, because Shem up. Again, it's again back to subject to Rishas Rab, maybe you walk between the parts. Now, however, with kever, but if let's say it was a grave, then even if it was broken apart to pieces, the guy would be tummy, because the grave combines it all together. meaning every part of the grave is metame ba'oil, even the empty parts, like a pasuk says in Mamibri Yates, oy bekever, so then automatically you'd be tame even if you pass between the parts. Again, further qualifies the Raisa. But Medvar, when did we say this? That if it's Meshuba Mefarik, that if it's broken apart, then you would be tar, because maybe you passed between the parts, there would be only be Mahaf Meragim if you were walking by foot. Avaton, but if you were carrying a load, or you were riding on something, then tummy you would be tummy, as the Gemara explains. Fish Mahaf Meragim, because when you're going by foot, maybe you didn't touch, maybe you didn't lean over, maybe you walked literally zigzag right between the pieces. Avaton, but if you're carrying something or riding on something, it's not possible that you didn't touch or that you didn't lean over, because for sure you move a little bit to either side, and you must have leaned over on the sides, and therefore that would presume that you were tongue. Additionally, another qualification, when do we say that regarding Nazir and Eista Pesach, that you're going to be tar, even though for sure he took up the whole width and there's nowhere to pass by without, because that's what's called B'tumas HaTahim. Only if no one knew about it, as we're going to shortly qualify, which we mentioned before, if it was a Tumas HaTahim. I'm telling you, Yadua, but if let's say someone knew that there was a person buried there, you didn't know when you walked by, obviously you're a Nazir, you don't want to become tummy, you're on your way to do a Pesach. You didn't know, but somebody knew. Then even regarding Nazir and Eista Pesach, going to be tummy. As the Bryce explains, as we mentioned this before. So what is Tumas HaTahim? It's called that no one at the end of the world even recognized. But if anyone that even one person at the end of the world knew about, it's a Tumas HaTahim, that's not considered the heter of Tumas HaTahim. As the Bryce explains, if you find a dead person that was buried in straw, or ba'afar in dust, or b'tzroris in rocks, that would qualify for Tumas HaTahim, because that's a tumah that was covered from every single person, and maybe there was a pile of rubble, of stones or dust or straw that fell on him, and no one ever knew that he was here at all. So that would qualify for Tumas HaTahim. But let's say he was b'mayim in water, or b'feila in the darkness, or in the clefts of rocks, into Tumas HaTahim. That wouldn't qualify for Tumas HaTahim, because this is not really tumah that's covered and hidden, because if someone just gazes, he could see. And the halacha which we've seen there was only said by a tumah that's in the depth, which is covered from every single person. And therefore, so therefore that would not qualify for Tumas HaTahim, because it's very likely that someone knows that this person said, you just didn't see, but he's visible. So that wouldn't qualify for Tumas HaTahim. Additionally, as we mentioned this in our previous Daf, we didn't say that the heter of Tumas HaTahim is Elames Bulvad, only for, again, the tumah of that you came in contact with a dead person. But that's either coming to exclude, which we had discussions regarding which we didn't resolve, either of Tumas Zivo or Tumas Sheretz, which is either regarding the Bible or regarding the Kain. That's what we're coming to exclude, but it's only definitively regarding that of the Tumas Nes. We'll start the next Mishnah, which continues on the halacha of the tumah of a carbon, which is what we're discussing here in these Mishnayos. Nitma Shalom. If let's say the whole carbon pesach becomes tummy, or the majority of it becomes tummy, so then you burn the carbon pesach in front of the bira, which Rashi says the whole mikdash, the whole temple is called the bira. So you burn it in front of the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara explain why. And you burn it me'atzei ha'maracha. You get to take the wood from the fires, the pyre that's used for the burning on the mizbeach. Now, let's say nitma me'ute. Let's say only part of the a small part of the carbon pesach becomes tar. And so to v'hanaiser, what's left over from the carbon pesach that was tar, but just they didn't finish it. So that they can burn in their own courtyards. I got gasela on their roofs. From their own wood. Now, Hatzekanin, but the misers that are stingy, they would even burn when they had just a little bit of a kim tummy, or their leftover carbon pesach, lefnei abir in front of the Beis Hamikdash, b'shvil lahanas matzah because they wanted to benefit from the wood. And shields to do kava with machakaven and the shtib. That's nasa beracha. He goes and he makes from the woods of the mizbeach. We'll just say this one line. My time. What's the reason why that if someone's carbon became tummy, at least a majority of it, then he has to burn it in front of the Beis Hamikdash. To embarrass them, come in the front of the class, embarrass him, he's not going to do this again. When it was just a little bit, or it's nicer, or whatever, he wasn't able to finish it fine. But if it was the whole carbon, or the majority, then to embarrass him, they make him bring it to the Beis Hamikdash and burn it over there. And this is discussed in today's Daf. And Pesachim Daf Pei Aleph was, we had mentioned the previous Daf, that Tumas HaTahim, because we wanted to answer that's not a raya regarding that of the clay, and also having Tumas HaTahim by mess, and just not by sheretz, because you can't say that's regarding the Bailam. So we said, so what are you excluding when you say by Tumas HaTahim? It's not regarding that of Kain. Oh, that's coming to exclude Tumas HaTahim of Ziva. That we're saying, even for the owner, Tumas HaTahim of Ziva is not going to be Miratza. The problem is that Rabbi himself says that you're going to be potter from being a Pesach Sheni when you become Tamei on the second day. So the Gemara says, so you see obviously that by Tumah Ziva that you will say Tumah Satayim, because else why you exempt from being Korban Pesach, even though you were in doubt as it happened. That's Tumah Satayim. That should say that it was not a valid Korban Pesach. No. So they said, well, you know why? Because it's not that because the heter of Tumah Satayim is working for the retroactive Tumah of L'Mafreya. There is no Tumah L'Mafreya. It's only Mekan Labah, and that's why the Korban Pesach is going to be valid. He himself says it's Tumah L'Mafreya. That's only rabbinical. But then the Gemara says a question. Then wait a second. If he holds there's no retroactive Tumah regarding Ziva, so then you can't say that's what we're coming to exclude of Ziva from the heter of Tumah Satayim because there's no Tumah L'Mafreya. So then we're back to the question. So when we're saying it's El Lemes Bovad, which is the same idea we ended on today's daf, which we ended in the previous daf, that the Tumah Satayim is only for Mes, you cannot be excluding that of Ziva because Ziva doesn't have retroactivity to say that retroactivity is not going to be a problem in the heter of Tumah Satayim. So the Gemara, you're right. It's according to BC, you have to say it's actually it's regarding the owner and the Korban Pesach. And when we're saying it's only Mes Bovad, is excluding sheretz because your BC holds in Sheretz not Tamei sheretz, and therefore if you were definitive of sheretz, Tumah sheretz, you would not be able to bring Korban Pesach. And if we have to exclude that even Tumah Satayim sheretz doesn't work, it's only Tumah Satayim of that of Nes. Then we said according to BC, a more general question is how do you become a Zav Gemur? If every day you're starting again because Mekan Labah, so every day was already a Shemer Siyam already in the morning. So the Gemara says either Shefas, she has a flow throughout the 3 days, or that she saw 2 days Bein Hashmashas, which therefore you never had the beginning of a day as Tahira to say that she's Shemer Siyam. Then we had regarding a Kohen that's doing the Avodah becoming Tameh. Do we say it's, even though we say generally Dechuya, but here we would say Hutra, because Tumah Satayim is what he has, and Tumah Satayim we say according to one man the Amar, which is who we're asking according to, says Likatchili, you can even do it before the Zrika of the Dam. So would the Kohen by the Korban Tameh also have that heter or not? The question was, do we learn from Korban Pesach? So the Gemara said you cannot say Kavalchem because if Pesach there's not mutter to do it when you have a definite Tumah for this Yachid that's a Nazar of Pesach. But it's still mutter for him Tumah Satayim. So Tamid which a Korban Tzibah that when you have a Tumah you do it, you could do it for sure. Tumah Satayim should be mutter. So no, because you can't make a Kavalchem from Malach Meshva Sinai, just like Rabbi Lezer said to Rabbi Kiva by Revi'as of Dam regarding the Nazar. Rather it says Rabbi, you do know it from Exer Shalom Miyad Miyad in Pesach. So yes, the halach would be mutter Tumah Satayim, but the Kohen Meratza the Tamid. Then we said that the Tumah Satayim you don't learn that from Sukkim because they're only asnachtas. Rather, it's halacha Meshva Sinai. And the Gemara also concluded that even if you know it before the Zrika, but you knew it after the Zrika, you could still be Meratza. You could still go ahead and do the avodah of the Tumah Satayim that you had, which you found out even before the Zrika of the Dam. In that discussion, which we had used to ask a question, which made us say that answer that we just said, we said if you find a dead person laying along the width of the road for Trumi, Tamei, for Nazar, and Pesach to be Tahar, that's the Gemara. When do we say this? Is only if there's no room to pass by. If there's room to pass by, the name of Trumi can be Tar because it's a suffix. It's not definitive. It's a suffix of Tumah b'Shus Ram, which you're going to be Tar. Additionally, we said when do we say that you're going to be Tumah b'Truma? Is only if you find the dead person whole. But if he's broken into the pieces, you can be Tar because again, it could be one between the pieces. In contrast, by a kever, by a grave, there's no going between because the whole grave is one thing of Tumah. Additionally, when do we say that he's going to be Tar if he's broken pieces? It's only if he went by foot. But if he's carrying something or riding something, then you go a little bit to the side, then we're going to presume that you're tummy. Additionally, when did we say this halacha of tahara for the Nazarites of Pesach is only Tumah Satayim? When no one in the whole world knew about it. But if someone in the world knew about it, even just one person, then even for Nazarites of Pesach, it's going to be tummy because that's not a Tumah Satayim. Tumah Satayim is only Shalahik B'Echad B'Sefer Olam, where you find, let's say, in straw and things like that. But if, let's say, it's a water or whatever, where someone could see it, then we didn't say. Then additionally, the Tumah Satayim is only said regarding mess, which again is either excluding that of Ziva or excluding that of Sheretz, which again either for the Kohen or for that of the Baal. Then we started the next Mishnah, which said if the majority at least of the Korban became Tummy, you have to burn it in front of the Beis Mikdash to embarrass him. He gets to use the Atzim Meracha. If some of it became Tummy or nicer, then he burns it in his courtyard from his own wood. In contrast to the stingy ones, the misers, they even then come to the Beis Mikdash to use the wood of the mistake. Any type of